Hey friends, welcome back. Gabriel Kevin here. How are you today? Hope you're having a wonderful, great day. Here we have another installment in my suite of tutorials for music producing, mastering, recording, mixing, and all that great stuff. So today we're going to talk about mastering. Mastering. Oh no, let's not. I don't want to. Well, yeah, you're going to have to. Sorry. Okay, so mastering. What is mastering? So we know what recording is, and we know what mixing is. I look at my recording and mixing tutorials and other tutorials. I'm not the end all be all of everything. And in the end, you need to master your songs. Why? Because you need to. Because mastering, first of all, in the industry and the Spotify's and Pandoras and the CD babies and all the aggregators and etc., they're going to expect you to send out mastered songs. So we're going to talk about what mastering is in a second, but the reason why you do it is because number one, it's expected. Number two, it really brings your songs to the level of the industry. And number three, it's the final touches on your songs. It's the things that you can't do in mixing. I'll repeat that. It's the things you can't do in mixing, and it's some of the things that you can't fix in mixing. So some of the things that you can enhance in mixing, and it's some of the things you can't fix in mixing. So it's not only that, but it's also pushing volume, and it's also just crafting. And best word I can think of is perfecting your art, perfecting your music. In the literary world, and I'm a published novelist, there's something called perfecting the novel. And that's where you go through all this editing and you go through all this stuff and you adjust the pots and you do this and that. It's the same thing as mixing, right? It's the same thing as perfecting a painting. So mastering is where you're so happy with the mix, and then you go to mastering house, or you do your own mastering, or a combination of both, or you send it out to like a disc makers, and they'll do it and send it back to you, etc. But you really need to master your songs. And I said this in the mixing tutorial. If you have really taken the time and used references and etc., and got your mix so well, you want to make your mix as close to a mastered mix as possible. And then when you get to mastering, it's going to be so much easier. So, again, it takes time to do this stuff. So, what is mastering? Well, mastering kind of uses, not kind of, but uses EQ, uses volume push, so that it's at if you don't push the volume, you don't have to push it crazy, because the more you volume push, the less dynamics you usually get. But if you don't, you're not going to your song's probably not going to get accepted. But if they do, then when they're heard, even though most streaming platforms will compress so most things sound even, you ever wonder why most things on a streaming platform or a radio, especially radio, sound pretty even in volume, even though there's a million of those songs out there. Not everybody mix and master to the same volume. So we'll compress a little bit out there. But if you're a really low volume and you didn't master it, and it just doesn't have that power of mastering, it's going to sound weak. So anyway, and not necessarily weak, but even if you do light mastering, so you can do a lot of heavy mastering, you can do light mastering, but you need to do some mastering. So anyway, look at other tutorials on mastering. There's tons of thoughts out there. One of the best mastering not folk, but I'll say folks, person that I've ever worked with, told me something, and it seems fairly obvious, but he said there's so many techniques and so many ideas of how to mix and master that music is so subjective. It's subjective. The world, and that's great. It's subjective, so you can put anything out there, But what I'm going to show is one path. It's one concept, and what I do and what I've learned from mastering houses and really great mastering folks, and just trial and error and looking at tutorials. Check out other tutorials. Look up mastering, and you'll see, yes, I want to master it. And then when you master it, and you go back and you listen to your non-mastered mix, and then you listen to your mastered mix, there is where you'll be convinced. So I know some people are, I'm not going to master, or I don't want to pay for the mastering. Then get a Studio One DAW, and it comes with a mastering session suite, which you're seeing on the screen right now. So I used to go to mastering houses. I also tried disc makers, which was great. They'll do the mastering. You pay a fee. Mastering houses and that kind of stuff, you're going to pay money. And then they send it back to you and they ask you, do you want it more dynamics? Do you want it more volume pushed, etc.? And we're going to get into all that stuff. And then they'll send it back and then you listen to it. And I believe the last time I did, I don't know if it's still true, that you get as many times back and forth as you want. So if you get it back and you're like, oh, I can't hear the snare now. So you go back into your mix and you adjust the snare, you can send it back, but sometimes they'll charge you if you make modifications. So if you don't make any modifications and you say, no, I want more dynamics, but you're not sending a new thing, I think that's free. But if you keep sending back new stuff and you're adjusting it, you're probably going to still pay. Now, if you go to a mastering house, which is fine, mastering houses are fantastic, you're going to get one person's mastering idea, which is fine. If you have heard that person's stuff, do it. You're going to pay for that session. Okay. These days, most of the times you don't even go to a mastering house. You just send it to them. You send it back like a disc makers. If you do go to a mastering house, and if there's some still out there, I'm sure there are. You're going to go, you're going to pay, you're going to sit in a room all day, and then you're going to do the whole thing, and they're going to A/B back and forth, from the original to the new, etc., different speakers, etc., and you're going to be happy. You're going to take it out to your car. You're going to come back in and say, do this, do that, come back to the car, and then you're going to leave, and you're going to be happy with your mix. You're going to go home, and then a week later, you're going to go, oh, I just wish that snare or something was more out, and this and that. Well, you're done. So nothing wrong with it, but this is the way it works. You're done. So if you're going to go back, you're going to readjust your mix. You have to give it back to them. It's probably going to be a whole new session, a whole new cost again, because they erase it usually. They don't keep the settings. They're going on to the next person. So there's pros and cons. Mastering houses are great. They're really experienced, but each one has a different way of doing it, and some will end up a little more bassy, some will end up this way, some will end up more volume push, some will end up with more dynamics. They'll use different speakers. It's great. I've gone to multiple mastering houses. I've used disc makers. I master my stuff myself now. Of course, I've got an experience and stuff like that. So hopefully this tutorial will help you with that and, try it. So anyway, let's get on with the actual mastering session here. So what you're seeing is the mastering session screen process in Studio One from PreSonus. So all my other mixing and recording stuff was using the actual song mix where you have like your multiple 10,000 tracks and you're doing your mix and everything and you got it all together and you're really happy with it. You use your monitors right and you went out and tried it in your car and all that stuff. So you got all that stuff done. That's the song session. This is the mastering session. So you open up a project in Studio One. And by the way, this tutorial, as all my tutorials mostly, will talk about concept, like I just did with mastering, and then it'll talk how it's applied within this DAW, this digital audio workstation, Studio One. But the concept of mastering, the concept of mixing and recording transcends the DAWs. So there's, in my opinion, there's always something good to learn and listen to if you don't already know it, even if you're not using Studio One. So anyway, so intermixed in here will be Studio One and then the ideas of mastering. So we're looking to perfect our music. So we create a project. So within Studio One, you can create a song and you can create a project. So when you create a project, you get this screen. There'll be nothing over here because you didn't import any songs yet. There'll be no wave files down here, and these are the songs, okay? And you'll have to start by importing your songs. So in this, you would do import file from the project up here, okay? When you import the file, you will find your song, the file that is .song. It will bring in the song and it'll put it in this list here. The first thing it's going to ask you is, do you want to import this? And it's going to do a mix down because it doesn't have anything yet. Now you can import your mix down. If you mix down already in the song session using song export mix down, you could bring that in here and just drag and drop it right here because it's a stereo mix, and that's why there's only 2 channels here, left and right. When you master, you're not using the 10,000 tracks. You've already done that. Now you have your stereo mix. You're happy with it. You can either drag and drop it in here or you can import the song. I would import the song because it puts it in the list here, and it has a tie back to the song. Okay, so what does that mean? What it means is when you add a song here and you import the song, it's going to do a mix down. It's going to jump back to your song. If your song's not already open, it's going to open the song for you. It's going to do a mix down, and it's going to come back here and drop this wave file, this stereo file here, and it creates a, if it was Wonderland like my song, Wonderland dash master dot wave in your master folder in your file structure, in the file structure in Studio One. And that master dot wave is the bridge between your song, 10,000 tracks mix, and the mastering session. Hope that makes sense. So try to make it a little clearer. If I hit view up here, and it shows songs and it shows projects. Now remember, projects is mastering. Okay, so I call my mastering session for these 5 songs Angel, and I'm using my Angel tutorial so I don't mess up my real one. And then if I come up here and I hit songs, I have my songs, and these are my song tutorials. But you would have your songs here, so you could have all 5 of these songs open here, and then when you try and you make any changes or you initially load this, then you don't have to wait for the mastering to go out and open your song and then do the mix down to bring it in. It's already there, so it's just going to jump over, do the mix down, come back and load these. Now, once it does that, and by the way, here with this view, you can jump between them. So if I hit this songs and I hit holding on to tutorial, it's going to jump. That means it's actually open behind the scenes. You can have multiple songs open at the same time and mastering sessions open at the same time. If you have enough CPU power, fine, do that, which is great. Then it doesn't have to keep opening the file for you, and that takes time to open song files. So this way I can now say, okay, I brought them all in, I've done the mastering, and I want to make a change. Now this is one of the beauty things about this. You're not going to pay for that. You're going to do it right here. So I listened to Yellow Butterfly, this is the first one here, and I thought, wow, that flute isn't high enough after the mastering. Because mastering can change some of your mix sounds and things. Because if you push the volume a lot, which we're going to look at, if you push the volume a lot, the things that are lower volume are going to come more equal with the things of the higher volume. So your peaks are going to get squashed a little bit, not squashed in a bad way. And that brings up everything. So sometimes if something's very prominent in your original mix and you push the volume, then all those guitars and everything else is going to come equal to that, and you might feel, oh, I lost that a little bit. It wasn't as where I wanted in my pre-mastered mix. Hopefully this makes sense. So then you're going to want to go back to the song, and as the song's open, you can just go right here, click on the song, the screen will switch back to the song. You can go, oh, I'm going to adjust that flute now. Boom, I adjust the flute. You come back here, and the same thing drops down in the song session, and you go back to projects, and you go back to your project, and you open it up, and what'll happen is, say I change Yellow Butterfly here, there'll be a little red dot here, a little red check mark, saying what? Saying, hey, you initially loaded the song, I did a mix down for you, Wonderland or Yellow Butterfly dot master dot wave, and I put it here, and I know that you changed something in that mix. That's what Studio One's going to say. It's not going to say I know, but it's going to know that you changed something, and you're going to come back here, because the minute you change it and the minute you save it in the song, it knows. It'll come back and have a red mark here, telling you that the version you have here does not include the last change you made. I think that's great. And I think there'll be a little red mark down here where the WAV file is. So then what you do is you click on this thing, and it'll just, if you only have one, because you can make changes to like 3 songs before you bring them all back in. So if you only do one, there'll be a little red mark here, and you click on this thing right here, and it'll just do it. It'll just go, it knows what you want to do. It even says it, I believe, if I hover over. Well, this will probably, yeah, it says mastering, status, and edit song. So if there's nothing here, no red mark, and you click that, you'll go back to your edit. It'll just switch over to the song so you can edit. If there's a red mark here and you click that, it's going to go, oh, you already edited. you want to update your mastering file so you can hear that change you made in the master version. And it'll open up a dialog box, and it will go out there and go get your song, mix it down, and bring it back. So you can just jump back and forth and make changes and listen to the master version. Oh, I'll go, okay, I want to do this. Cymbals are too loud. Go back. And I've done this. My cymbals were too loud. They came out too much in the master. And I went back and I adjusted the cymbals back down a little bit, and then it came back, a little red dot there. I clicked on the dot, bing, it re-updated it, and I was happy with it. If you have multiple ones that you change, so you listen to your mastering, you have a notepad, I want to change Yellow Butterfly this, I want to change Red Hot this, and Wonderland this. You go back and change them all, there'll be a red dot on every one of them. Now, you can click one and it'll update it, or you can come up here to Project and click Update Mastering Files. It'll bring up a dialog box and say, here are the ones that you have changed. Do you want me to bring them in? And you say yes. Obviously, you're going to say yes, or you would have made the change. So there's multiple ways to do that. Cool. So that's how it interfaces back and forth with your song, which, if you were doing a mastering house, you go to mastering house and you come back and a week later, you want to go back, you're going to pay again. They have to reload it again. They have to reset all the parameters. All your parameters are set here. So is it a little daunting to master? Yes. If you're inexperienced, yeah, it's going to be, a challenge. You're going to have to work at it and look at a lot more tutorials other than mine. But I highly recommend to master your own stuff. Now, there's one school of thought, before we get into the techniques here, again, we're in concept. There's one school of thought that says the person who mixes it, generally you, the artist, should not be the person that masters it. You should use an independent person to master. Now, there's value to that because you are in the mix. You've been mixing and mixing and mixing, and your ears are so attuned to it. Sometimes it's something called your ears get tired, and you can't see the forest for the trees. I hate using cliches, but that's a good one. And you can't hear some things that another experienced ear, especially a mastering person's ear, will hear. I believe you can get past that. I believe that we're all capable of doing mastering and mixing. My recommendation would be that once you've done your final mix and you're happy and you went through all your references, take a week off. Take 2 weeks off if you don't feel like you're pressured. And then come back. You should do that anyway. And mastering places will tell you to do that. Like, walk away from it. Your ears will get tired. And then come back, and then you'll hear it in a different perspective. You should do that when you're mixing. Walk away. Take 3 days off. Come back. You'll hear things differently. Trust me. Okay, so that's how it interfaces back and forth with the song. So you can make changes on the fly and bring them back in. Okay, the next thing before we get into the actual mechanics here, and I talked about this in my mixing tutorial, is you need good reference speakers. Don't use headphones. You can use headphones to hear where things are in the spectrum, stereo spectrum and stuff, but don't use headphones. That's not a very good reference. But you can use it sometimes. There are schools of thought on that too. But in your final analysis, have some good monitor speakers. Now, I have multiple 5-inch monitor speakers, 8-inch monitor speakers. I have little computer speakers, stuff like that I use as references. So I'll start with my 5-inch, and then I'll go to my 8-inch. Then I'll go to my, little computer speakers, and I'll go to my boom box. And that happens in a lot of mastering houses. They'll have a boom box there, so that you can hear it how it could every possible way that you can try that the world may hear it. Because people use earbuds, people use big stereos, people use car stereos, people listen to it at work on their computer speakers. You want it to sound the best it can sound at every one of them. So the more references you have, and that's why you can go to a mastering house. I know one guy that uses only one pair of speakers, but he's so good. And he's so used to their speakers. But other ones, they had like 3-4 different speakers, big ones. Yamaha NS10s. I don't know if they still make them, but it was probably the worst speakers in the world. But they use them because they're the worst speakers in the world, and the great speakers, and the boombox. So, and NS10s, if you look it up, NS-10 Yamahas, I used to have a pair, and yeah, that hell of a challenge to mix to those. But if you get it to sound good in those, you're on your right path. Okay, so the whole thing about mastering is not just making the final perfected product, but that it sounds good in as many ways that the people in the world will listen to. Okay, hopefully that helps. So just have a good pair of monitor speakers and Then after you do it in the monitor speakers and you feel the mastering is good, you have to take it out to your car. You have to take it out to your stereo. You have to take it out to your earbuds off your smartphone. You have to do that because you have to make sure. You'll find, oh wow, it sounds different here. It's going to sound different. It's going to sound different here. It's going to sound different there. You got to find that happy medium. So that's the fun part, I think, because then you're in control of your world. Control freak. Okay. Enough of that. Okay, so now what did we do? We added our songs by importing them. When you do that and it updates the mastering file, it will load these WAV files down here. These, what's it called? Waveform files. It's not necessarily a WAV file. And, well, it's a WAV file that in the structure. Okay, I digress. So now I have Yellow Butterfly up here, Red Hot, Wonderland, Another Day, Holding On To. And again, this is a tutorial version, so I'm not messing up my songs, so I can show you stuff. And it'll put it here in that order. So I have Yellow Butterfly, and there's a little name here. It says Yellow Butterfly, and I can scroll across. And then it has Red Hot, and then Wonderland, Another Day, and Holding On To. Now it puts it in this order, and it's in that kind of staggeredness, because out of this, up here, you can burn a CD. And then you could put the space between each song right here. You can move these things and move these back and forth, which I'll show you. And you can say, okay, when this song ends, it's usually 2 seconds is a standard, but you might want 1 second, jump to the next one. It might have been a slow song that you wanted to breathe afterwards before you jump into the next one, so maybe 1, 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds. Okay, in the beginning, I think it kind of forces you at 2 seconds in the beginning. So you can burn a CD. You can create an image, which is another way of, if you create an image, that you can send that image to a duplication house, like a disc makers, and they can use the image to create duplicate CDs for you. A DDP image is the same idea, that you create a DDP image. It'll create an image file and a bunch of other DDP files. You take all of those and you send it to disc makers. I'm always saying disc makers. There's I think Atomic is another one, but just look them up. And you don't have to send them a CD to duplicate. You can send them a DDP image because you don't want to have any bit loss. So if you created a CD, you can have slight bit loss sometimes with that, depending on your CD burner. So if you're going to duplicate CDs, I would use the DDP image. That's what I've used. And then there's digital release. So if you click on digital release, it brings up this dialog box, and there are your songs, and you can then, it'll create WAV files for you. If you look at my backup and file structure tutorial for Studio One, I go through the whole projects and where the releases are. They call these releases. And if you do one of these, and I do 5 songs, it'll create a folder of all those 5 songs. And this one says WAV file 16-bit 44.1, and that's what it'll create for you in that folder with the name of your project. Mine would be Angel. I could also drop this down and make MP3 files, etc. So I usually, when I master, I will always create an MP3 file. When I'm checking, I'll create an MP3 file, and I'll use 44.1, and then I'll just hit this OK, and it'll go into a little dialog box as it's doing it. And then in the end, it'll create that folder in the release folder of your project, and then you can grab that and go listen to it someplace else. If you want to use a WAV file, then you can hit WAV file, and there's other ones here. You hit WAV file, and you can decide 16-bit, 44.1, or 24-bit and 48. If you don't know that CDs are always 16-bit 44.1. So if you wanted to create, a DDP file, I believe that if you're using disc makers, you have to go check their site, what their requirements are. But 16-bit 44.1 would be a CD. And if you clicked OK, then it will create another folder, a release folder of the ones with the WAV file, with that resolution and sample rate. If you use 24, it'll create another one. So there's all kind of possibilities here, and this is the location where it will go. You don't have to do them all. Say you've already satisfied with Yellow Butterfly and Red Hot, and only Holding On To is the one you're still working on, so you can unclick these and just do that one, and it'll create a folder of this format and just the one song. So that way it saves time, and you just checking out that one song. And down here is just some other parameters. Use range of events, versus the track markers. That's up to you. Add track numbers to the file name. I have that on. Add artist name to the file name. I have that on. Use real-time processing. I have that off because it does just as well without the real-time processing, and it's a little bit faster. And I do not publish it to SoundCloud. I work on my own. So, okay, so that's what this is for digital release. So you can create CDs various ways: burn, image, or DDP. I would recommend DDP. Excuse me. And digital releases for, for listening and checking it out outside of your studio. And you will use digital releases to send it to the aggregators, TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid, and then they'll send it out to the Spotifys and the Pandoras. And I believe most of them want 16-bit 44.1, but always check with the aggregator that you choose, DistroKid or TuneCore or whatever, and they'll have their requirements there, and that's what you will create from this digital release. Okay? And the digital release will be the mastered version. Now, we know how it interfaces with the song sessions. Going through that. You can drag and drop these. And so if I want to put Wonderland first, you just drag it up above Yellow Butterfly, and it will do it. I'm not going to do it, but it will do it. And it'll replace it down here in the waveform. And all of a sudden, Wonderland will be here, and it'll shift everything based on the listing here. So that's really cool if you want to rearrange things real quick. This is playable down here, and I have lowered the volume. So if I want to play Yellow Butterfly, I'm going to just pick a spot, pick it right there. And this volume is down. So if you go here where I have my master volume, so up here you have what you're adding effects and stuff like that, you're mastering stuff to the individual song. And down this section here is anything that you want to insert on all of them. Now, I don't put anything here. I just do it by individual song. But you could have, plugins. We're going to go into them. You could have plugins here that is your mastering plugins that is actually doing the mastering for individual songs that have different settings, which I do, because, you're going to have different EQs and, it might push one song more volume than another one. And then you can have one overall here. So if you want to do that, that would be this section here. I usually don't put stuff here, but this volume fader here is the final version. I usually have this one up here at 0, and this one up here, and this one here at 0. I'd rather have it at 0 and then let my mastering plugin adjust the volume, and we're going to see that. So hang in there. Okay, so I can play this. So I'm going to play Yellow Butterfly. Now, what you're hearing is the mastered version. So if you have headphones on like I do, and that's not what I would use for mastering, but if I had my monitors on, when you hit play, it's applying this plugin. And we're going to get into what's in that plugin. So what you're hearing is the mastered version, but what you're seeing is not the mastered version. Because, and I believe this is a correct way of doing it, the way Studio One works, is when you import these songs, it's going to import, and that's the waveform of the non-mastered song. It's your mix. So if you just did a mix down and you never did mastering, this would be your waveform. Now, if you look at this, there's a lot of blue space. Now, you can change the color of this and everything. I use blue because it's like the ocean. No, I use blue, and there's a lot of blue here, and that's called headroom. And what that means is that there's enough room here for me to push the volume and really be able to work it without just totally not having any dynamics. So the more headroom you have here in your mix, okay, the more, see these little peaks and stuff like that? And I'll give you a good one. If we go all the way here, let's look at Wonderland. Look how much more peaks. So drum hits, cymbal hits, tambourines, all those are these little peaks. This is volume. So this is left and right. So they're going to look a little different because your stereo mix is going to be a little different on the left and the right. And these are the peaks of volume of that's occurring, like something's louder than something else. And there's still good headroom here, okay? And you want that headroom. Now here you go to Holding On To, which is a very dramatic song, Epic Love. And this is the chorus, and then look at how it drops, and that's the verse. And if you listen to this song, that you'll hear like it's very vocal, chorusy, and then it drops into the verse, and it gets more, more smooth or a lower volume, etc. So you want this headroom. So in working with mastering folks and stuff like that, when you're doing your final mix, in the song mix, your master volume level, the meter, and your master volume, not here, the master volume in the mix should hover around -6 dB. and peaking up to -3. You don't want it at 0, and you don't want it above 0. Why? So you get this headroom. So it gets headroom, so you have room to master it. So should hover around all the time -6, peaking up to -3. Sometimes I have things that go a little bit more than that because I have like if you look at holding on to, whoa, went too far. Holding on to, some of these peaks are more than -3, but that's my intent. I'm just giving you what your starting point should be. And Yellow Butterfly, look how low it is because it's a softer song. It doesn't have as much dynamics. The more headroom you have, the more you'll be able to preserve your dynamics when you push your volume. And we're going to talk about that. So when you come in here, if I had very little blue space here and this thing's all peaked all over the place, you have no headroom to you push it, you've already maxed out the volume and you have no dynamics. If this is totally all dark, you've really just like don't have that much dynamics in your song. And not that you have to have dynamics, but you have to have some dynamics in terms of being able to manage those dynamics when you master. Okay, so again, when you hear it, this is the mastered version. Okay, now let's look at the screen. Up here is pretty much your EQ spectrum, and it is visual. So when you look at this, and I'm going to try to talk over it so we can watch it as we go, you can change the view of this to octave, third octave, 12th, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I use 12th because I like the way it looks, and it preserves peaks and stuff like that. Like you see, all these peaks are left. And down here, right here, is like your normal, volume metering. Your meter pretty much, and you can change that. So you can use, this one, K20, K14, K12. I think there's a European one. Check all this out. Look this up. I'm not going to go into detail every one of these, or this tutorial is going to take forever. So look these up. The bottom is just different metering styles. It doesn't change your mastering. It's just the view of the meter. Up here, you change this. It doesn't change your mastering. It just changes the view. So you get comfortable with what you like to see. So see this 0 here? You don't want any of your meter to go above that 0. And I'll show you how to ensure that you never will. Because if you go past it, it's going to clip, and this is going to turn red, and it's going to say you clipped, and you don't want to do that. But within this meter, depending on which one of these meter views that you use, you can find, and this is how you push your volume or not push your volume. The more volume you push, the less dynamics generally you're going to get. So, when things are dynamic, it's low and it comes out loud, and it comes out low and it comes out loud. That's a lot of dynamics. When everything's kind of smooth in the volume and you have little dynamics, that means you push your volume. So if you have a lot of dynamics, chances are around this 9 or 6, that's where your main meter is going to hover most of the time, maybe go past that a little bit. But the more room between that main body of where the meter hovers and where you go past that with little dynamic peaks, between that and this 0 will be how, the more you're this way to the left is going to be more dynamics. And then if you really want to push your volume a lot, you could have your main total constant volume right here, right before that 0, and tiny little peaks in here, but you ceilinged it. You put a ceiling at 0, and that's going to be really loud. That's going to be a lot of volume push. These wave files in the end, not here, but when you look at your final wave files, you'll have very little blue space. It'll be like really packed. And sometimes you've seen that. If you ever seen it's like all just packed, and that's a lot of volume push. And it's all taste. It's all subjective. Some music you want to have that volume pushed heavily. Maybe some like rock ballad, you don't want the volume pushed heavily. But if you have a CD, you have to find a happy medium between your songs. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so this is your meter, and that's going to show where your volume levels are, and this is going to show where your EQ is. So if you look at this, I had stopped. So this shows that I tail off the bottom, which I tend to do. So this is like really way down there in the 35 range, and I kind of tailor the top off a little bit, and that's what is coming in, and that's what I'm going to work with. So when I play Yellow Butterfly, you'll watch this, and I'm going to click these other ones so you'll see the difference, and I'll click these down here, and you'll see the difference of the metering. Now, because I have this volume here low, so we don't blow out our eardrums in this tutorial, my metering is going to hover like here in the middle, but that's not really where it is. It's really up here, and I'll show you where I go. I tend to have a happy medium between dynamics and volume. I lean towards the volume because, you know, when you're mastering and then you start doing it, you can play with it. You can say, okay, I'm going to push it a little more, and then you go back and listen to it. I'm going to push it a little less, and you have to find where you love it. So, but I'm just showing you what the visual is. One last thing over here, looks like a star. This is your stereo spectrum. So this gives it a cool. It's not really precise. It's happening as it's going, but this will give you a really good idea that if everything, and we'll look at it, and I'll try to talk over the song. If you look at everything's like in this vertical line, you have very little separation left and right, and then it'll show you as it separates back and forth, wider and wider. That shows as the song's going, where your stereo separation is more and less, and it's going like this, which it should do, and that's because the instruments come in and out and stuff like that. So that gives you a good visual for that. So there's three visuals here. There's the meter, there's the EQ, and there's the stereo spectrum. One last thing, LUFS and LU, they are loudness units. They're measurements in the industry. Please look them up. I'm not going to go into detail here, but look them up. You can switch between this one and you can switch between this one, and it's going to show you where you fall in this. And if you look up Spotify and stuff like that, they have certain requirements for this. Not necessarily requirements, but they're going, if you come in with something that's louder than they have, that they produce, they're going to compress you down to where they are. So you should kind of look at Spotify and Pandora and stuff like that, and where their LUFS and LU settings are when they do streaming. So if you don't want them to be compressing you down to their thing, then try to meet where they're at, and they won't really do the compression because you're where they're at. If you're lower than it, then they may be pushing your volume up, which you may not want. So, real important. Go check out the streaming platforms and see what their parameters are here. You don't have to be perfect on it, but just be conscious of where they're at, and then you can see where you're at as it goes. And then as you're going, you can hit this reset and see it reset it. And so you can play with it and reset it as you go. So let's play, and we can look at the different things. And then we'll get into the actual mastering. But I just wanted, the screen is really cool. It's really helpful. So I'm going to play and try to talk over it. If I can, I'll lower the volume. So I like this because I can see it's more defined. But if I do this, it goes like that. And I'll lower this a little bit. And if I do octaves, so that to me, it's fine. But I like this. It really shows more definition. This is this one. Now it's all the same song. It's just a different interpretation. That's really funky. I'm not even sure what to do with that. But if you do, put in the comments. So this one comes in from the right. And that's the last one. I like this one. Now down here, now again, my meter, see this line here? This is where you're kind of being consistent. And these are little peaks. So this is a lot of headroom here. So there's a lot of dynamics. But if I do this, and these are different ones. Look these up. They're used differently in the world. Look, I move 0 over here. And then this one. I use this one. It's very simple. Okay, cool. And if you look here, if I reset this, it resets it, and it comes up where it's kind of hovering around, and then the LU. Same thing, if I reset it, there you go. Now because this is low, this stereo spectrum here is not shown a lot, but when I raise this volume, watch your ears. It's getting bigger. So, I have a lot of stuff in the center, but I have some stereo separation, but it's not massive. So anyway, that just gives you a visual. But, honestly, when you have your volume up here, right in this area, where you should be about, this will be this will be a lot bigger, and you'll be able to see it more. And you can adjust your headphone volume if you're using headphone or your monitor volume, and then push the volume so you don't blow out your speakers, but then you can actually hear it with the volume pushed. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I know this video is going long, but I think it's important. Now, one last thing before we get into the actual plugin. Right here, you can put your album name, and my album name is not Angel anymore, but that's what it started with. Your artist name, and then you can drop this down, and you can put, and this is not my album art at this point. It's pretty cool though, isn't it? And you can put your UPC or EAN, same thing, number, your songwriter, and all your metadata for the album. And then you can do the same per song by dropping this down. So you can say, and here, if you have an ISRC, which I have, you can put that in here, or you can have any of the aggregators assign it for you, and the year and stuff like this. And a lot of this stuff moves over to the metadata into your digital release and some into your CD. Okay, and each one of these, I'm assuming you have the same album cover for each of the songs, but you could have it different, I guess. So that's important over there. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Now, let's go into the plugin. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so I use Ozone 9 from iZotope. iZotope. iZotope is a company, and they have a lot of great plugins. I use their iZotope Ozone 5. The last one that I picked up was Ozone 9. I got an email saying Ozone 10 is out there. But, a lot of this stuff is, the same, I think, when you transcend those things. So I'm going to double click on this. We're going to use Yellow Butterfly. So I'll click on this, okay? And you can have multiple plugins here. And I put these here as an example. And you can turn them off and on by this little activate button here. So I turned it off, and there'll be no mastering. And then you turn it on, and there'll be mastering. And then you can toggle back and forth if you want. So let's actually go to Wonderland. And every one of these, I only have one Ozone. So I'm going to double click on this. It's going to bring up the Ozone dialog, and there it is. So what do we have here? What we have here is the mastering plugin from iZotope. Now, there's a mastering assistant, which we're going to go into, that you can use. There are presets that you can use. So they're like, here's a mastering for a pop song, and they're starting points, right? You just don't. If you did it and you just took it, great, you're done. But generally, you're gonna modify it, and after you do the mastering assistant, you'll tend to hopefully modify that. So in my mastering, okay, and right across here are the different, I would say, mini plugins within this main plugin. So here, I have EQ. So I click on that, and that's my EQ, which we'll go into. And if you look at my mixing tutorial, I kind of explain this insanity that I do. There's dynamics, and dynamics, I click on that. I have it off. I'm going to turn it on. You turn it on by this little I button here, I believe. And whoa, pretty cool. That's dynamics. Pretty much compression and limiting. So here's the compressor down here. Here's the limiter there. If you don't understand compression and limiting, again, I don't want to hold up too much time here, please look up compression. There are tons of tutorials on it. Please look up limiting. They're very related. The only difference between these mainly is that compression has a ratio and limiting doesn't, has a ceiling. And you can turn them on and off, etc. And then there's thresholds and stuff like that. And then there's a visual here that you can drag and drop, which will change this over here. And you can pull this guy in, and it'll do that, and all kinds of stuff. So to explain all this, you need to understand compression and limiting. If you understand compression and limiting, then this would make sense to you. So, and there's a bunch of other stuff here, and there's tutorials within iZotope to explain this. But this is the dynamics. When they say dynamics, it's compression and limiting of the song, okay, that you're doing. And you have done probably compression and limiting in the mix, but this is doing the compression and limiting across the whole song. Okay, then you have, excuse me, I use dynamic EQ. That looks kind of cool. So I'm going to turn this dynamics off. And this is dynamic EQ. So EQ, first one, is static. This will happen no matter what throughout the song. It's not changing. Dynamic EQ, actually, I use the mastering assistant, and it set these. And what happens is, where these are pulling down, like here, around here, usually probably like the S's and stuff like that, or up here, I forget which one. And it'll adjust your mix, but it'll only happen when it hits a certain threshold. So if I click on this, okay, there's not only saying it's a bell curve for the EQ, and there's multiple ones you can do. There's bell, there's shelves and stuff like that. And here's the frequency, here's the gain, up or down. Here's the Q, that's how wide it is. This is on or off. This is you solo it, which is really cool. You can just solo that one, and these will all be off. And then you hit the X, excuse me, and then the X will just delete this. Threshold says at this dB, negative 20.8 is when this engages. It's cool, it's dynamic. So this EQ is not always on. It's only when it hits the threshold, and the same for these. So it's very cool because what it does is, like for a snare hit's hitting fine, and then the drummer, if you had a live drummer, and he or she hits it really hard, and you hit a snare lightly, you hit a snare really hard, there's a difference in the EQ in that. And this captures it and goes, oh, it hit the threshold, cut that off right there, and so it keeps the EQ sound of the snare consistent based on wherever you put this. And then the last one is the maximizer, and this is where you push your volume or not push your volume, and you set your ceilings. There are different modes: IRC, this, LL, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one has classic or modern or transient. There's a lot of stuff here. You can look this stuff up, educate yourself. I always think it's a great idea. But the main thing here is this section right here. Okay, this says ceiling and this says threshold. The ceiling, let me move this out of the way a little bit. The ceiling is where here in the meter, the sound is not going to go past. The volume is not going to go past. So if you set the ceiling at -1 dB, right here, if this line here next to the 0, to the left of the 0 is -1, you will not see anything go past that line. You set literally a ceiling. Now, how do you push volume? Well, first thing you got to do is set a ceiling. Now, you can set the ceiling and put it at 0, which I just did. That means that it will go up to this 0. That's where your ceiling will be. Obviously, you can't go past 0. Now, sometimes there might be some transients and stuff like that that may go past the 0, and you'll see the clip. So I tend to put this down, and in talking with people and stuff like that, to -1. That way, there's a little room up there, and it's not just volume peaked all the way to the max. So you have a little headroom left. Threshold is how much, the simplest way of putting it is how much you're going to push that volume. So the lower the number here, the more volume you're going to get. So I'm at -9. I think I started like somewhere around negative here. And I thought, well, and then the meter's going to show it there. And then I'm going to push it. And as I'm going down, I'm pushing the volume. And as you push the volume, you're going to start losing your peaks. Okay, it's going to start taking everything that's at a low volume and meeting it up. So say your highest peak hits -1. That's not going to go anywhere. Say it's a snare hit. It's not going to go anywhere. Then as you push your volume and you lower that threshold, all the other sounds, it's not doing it by track, but all the other sounds that you've mixed are going to start coming up closer and closer to that other one. And it's pretty much doing a compression and more limiting. And it's limiting, it's just pushing the volume up, but holding a ceiling. So just picture it. All these little guys down here, all these little, if you look here, all these little ones here in this low volume here are going to start meeting this one here in the high volume, and it's going to push everything up, and they're going to start getting like this. So you're going to start losing, there's nothing wrong with it, but you have to decide what you want to do. You're going to start losing dynamics for the sake of volume. If you want to maintain dynamics, then you have to lose some volume. So where's that happy medium that you want? And it's all by ear. Okay? So I would recommend setting your ceiling at -1. You can always move it. So what would happen if I have this at -9.3 and I'm pushing the volume to that point and it goes up to -1? What if I move this? I didn't touch this one, but I moved this one up. So I said, let's go to -0.5. So I raised the ceiling. So anything that was butting up against that ceiling of -1, and I raised, and think about it, just see it physically. I raised the ceiling. Anything there that wants to get above the -1, whatever peaks, are now free. They're out. They're gone. They're free. Then they're going to start peak. They're going to start their dynamic move again up to the negative zero point 0.5 ceiling. So then you will gain dynamics because it's not pressing those down at the high volume. Everything here is volume. This is not EQ. This is volume. Okay? So you got to play with it. So I would start at -1 and then start this somewhere around 6 or 7 and pull it down until you hear. And you'll hear it when you play the song. But remember, it's pushing the volume of the song, but it's doing more than that. It's actually compressing everything. It's pushing all the volume of everything that's at a low volume up higher to everything that's at a high volume, and and you start losing. You could almost hear the snares. It was really nice, and all of a sudden the snares getting a little duller and duller and duller because everything is being pushed up. But I went really crazy to -14. So this is mastering, and this is what you would do. But when you listen to it through monitors and stuff like that, you got to play with this. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if this is all too much for you and you don't want to do this, then I would recommend sending it out to disc makers or somewhere like that, or go to a mastering house. But then you have to pay them and stuff like that. You know what they're going to do? They're going to do this. I'll say it again. They're going to do this. Maybe not with Ozone. They're going to, if they have a service, think about it, that thousands of people will send to them maybe a day or a month, okay? And they have different mastering rooms. I'm assuming that they already have models already created. So when they ask you, do you want a lot of dynamics? And there's checkboxes. You want a lot of dynamics, you want middle, or you want a lot of volume. I'm pretty sure, I'm guessing, and you can check with them, that they already have a model out there. So they're going to put your song into a model like this already preset. And then they'll play with the EQ and stuff like that and send it back to you. But they're going to have a starting point, because if you want a lot of volume, this is going to be pretty high. If you want a lot of dynamics, it's going to be kind of lower. And I'm sure there's a starting point. And then you pay them for that, and you say, well, I want more dynamics, and they're going to come back and either change the model or change some of your parameters. But I don't think somebody's sitting there for hours and hours and hours on your one song. So if you want to learn this and try it, get Studio One. This comes with it. Then I would recommend Isotope Ozone. That's known in the industry like this, and try it. You have to. You can use Ozone in your mixing, so you're not really losing it because you didn't use it in mastering. But try it and see what happens. And I'm a fan of experimenting. Now you say, hey, Gabriel, where do I start? That's why they have this mastering assistant up here, and we're going to look at that. And I know we're almost at an hour here, but this is important. Oh, by the way, the meters here this is your pre and post. So this is what it came in at, and this is where it's at. I leave them pretty much at 0, even though it's changed a little bit there. And the other cool thing here is that it's called gain match. What happens is if you have gain match on, if you have gain match off, and you had the volume all the way up to here, and you had gain match off, it's not matching the gain, and you bypass. Okay, I want to hear the master version. I'm going to hit bypass. I'm going to hear the non-master version, and that's your A, B. You're seeing I did this, and it's doing that. Okay, what'll happen is when you bypass, the non-master version is going to be lower in volume, so it's going to drop in volume, and it's hard to judge that. So if you have gain match on, and you hit bypass, then it's going to match the gain. So if the gain is here, for the master, and the gain is here for the non-master, that's hard to make that judgment. So what it'll do, gain match on, when you bypass, it's going to pull this volume up to here, so you can hear at the same volume any nuances in your EQs and stuff like that. Now, if you want to hear how much gain you're actually getting, volume you're actually getting by doing this, then you take gain match off and you hit bypass, and it'll say, oh, it's this low, it goes to this volume. Again, it's not very dynamic here because I don't want to blow your ears off or my ears off. Okay, so we're going to get to mastering system in 1 second. I just want to go back to this EQ that I did. This is where I usually start, and this is a little bit more dramatic than I usually do. Let's see, another day. Another day is probably... And by the way, if you just click on the song, it'll just switch to mastering session. So here, again, I tail off this down here. I'm not worried about these big subwoofers, and this is really like almost no sound down here. I just tail this off. I always add a little extra air, and I tend to, if you look at my mixing tutorial, I tend to remove this muddy area, and I tend to enhance, where the vocals are here. And this is my starting point. I usually cross around 1,000. This is a starting point for me, and I'll adjust as I go. And this is like a typical sine wave kind of thing, but you can do whatever you want. But what happens if you want to use the mastering assistant. So let's go to Yellow Butterfly, and I'm going to go to this one, which is on. Make sure I'm on the right one. Okay, so I switched to that one. Now, what does a mastering assistant do? So mastering assistant is, say you had nothing here. There was nothing up here. You just opened this up for the first time. This is Ozone, Ozone 9. It will analyze your song, and it will create this based on the parameters you asked. And we're going to do that in a second, and then we'll be done with the mastering. So what you do is you pick the song, you open up this. Now, it'll erase all this, okay? And, well, let's do this. Let's get rid of this. Let's delete this. Or better yet, let's just add another ozone. So I'm going to go over here, isotope, ozone 9. I'm going to drag it over here. And that's how you drag and drop your plugins. And it's going to open up, and there's nothing here. Okay, this will be your starting point. It's going to assume you want EQ, and it's going to assume you want to maximize it, because that's EQ is generally something that happens in mastering, and pushing volume is also another thing that happens in mastering. So it's going to start with these, and they're both on. But it will add other things if it feels it needs it. So we'll take Yellow Butterfly. I hit the mastering assistant. What are you going for? Okay, so I'm going for modern or vintage. Okay, and that, this says creates a processing channel using vintage modules, and this is using modern one, obviously. I click modern because of today's stuff, but you can try this. Do it once, do it again, do it once, do it again. This is loudness and EQ. So this is manual or reference. Manual, it'll analyze your waveform down here. It's going to manually do it. Reference, you need to load another track here. So say you like the way a Bon Jovi song is or something, you could actually load in that song, and it will use that song as a reference and try to mimic the mastering of that song to your song, which is kind of cool. I use manual. Then here the intensity would be low, medium, or high. That would be just like this maker saying, do you want a lot of dynamics, middle dynamics, or a lot of volume push? Okay, so for our sake here, we'll say medium. And then this one here says your destination. Are you going for streaming or CD? Now, since the world mostly is streaming and, not as much CDs these days, I pick streaming. Okay? And that's my starting point. Now, I'm going to go, and you could hit CD. And remember, you can just do this again and again and again. This is a starting point. So then I'm going to hit next. And this says for best results, play the loudest portion of your track. So I'm just going to I'll pick right before the loudest portion, and then let it go to that. Or I'm going to pick right here. Okay, so I'll come in a little low, and I know what this is. This is the end of the verse, and it's going to go into the chorus. Then you go to next. Okay, and usually it comes up and say start playing. But once you get here, you can start playing, and you're going to see it analyze. Here we go. Yellow butterfly. Was it curiosity? You can hear the music changing. Are you an angel from heaven? Serendipity. This was meant to be. It's a magical moment. It's actually doing mastering. Now it says I'm done. Do you want to accept it? Well, you haven't. You've heard it, but now you want. You say accept, and look what it did. It created your EQ. Now this is kind of funky. Okay, it did not add any dynamics. It didn't feel like it needed any. It did add dynamic EQ, so it picked places where it felt that the volume was hitting at a level that the EQ was changing. So it's kind of balancing that out, and then it added the maximizer. Now look at this. I said moderate, so it's only a negative 4.2, so which is not a lot of volume push. Okay, because I said moderate. Had I said loud, this would probably be higher. Now this EQ, the only thing about this is like it tends to do that kind of thing, so I usually change the EQ, but I start with this. This is saying here that it believes based on modern mixes that I didn't have enough high end in the overall mix, so it's adding it. So when I play it, and this is actually applying this right now when I play this. If you look at my waveform, it's true, I don't have a lot of high end, so it's adjusting for that. So it's telling you things, but at the same time, you might want to play with it. So you might want to add a thing here, pull it down, widen it, and maybe here. Maybe I don't like this much, I want to pull this down. Okay. And maybe I want to take this and do my curve. Okay. And you got to play with it, and you got to listen to it. Then you can bypass it. So I'm going to bypass this. I bypass the maximizer. This is the original volume. That's the new volume. Pretty dramatic, huh? And it's not peaking. Now you won't hear much when you bypass the dynamic because it has to hit those thresholds. But the EQ, if I take these out, see, it's kind of dull. Now I'm going to put this on, and it's a little brighter. But see, the problem is it's not loud enough. Now, if you have an ear for stuff, you'll notice that is like really like everything's together. This kind of smooths it out. Okay. So, stop. Okay. So you have to actually listen to this, and you might not in this tutorial hear those those changes, but I can hear them in my headphones. But headphones aren't the best thing to listen to when you're making EQ changes. But just the point is that this little thing up here, you can bypass it, you can solo it, and you can check. So when you're playing this, especially the most dramatic one would be the maximizer. If I hit this and I turn it on, so it lights up when it's on, and I say let's just put it up here. And now I turn it off. Big difference of what it's doing. And you can see, this is where it's pushing it. And this is your threshold. So, and then you can read up on this stuff here. This video tutorial is going very long. It does give a nice visual up here where it is limiting. So it's pulling this stuff down. This is volume reduction. And this is also where it's pushing the volume up. I'm sorry, not volume reduction. It's peak reduction and pushing the volume up. I apologize for that. So, a lot of stuff here. I could do a whole nother, continue for another hour on it, but I'm not going to do that. So, this is just two things. One, the concept of mastering. Number one, you need to do it. Whether you go to a mastering house, you go to a place like Disc Makers where you can send it out and it comes back, and most mastering places now send it out and come back. But Disc Makers does have a nice, I don't have any stock in Disc Makers, I just happen to use them, and I want to tell you that. So it's a good reference for you to check out. And they'll do, I believe they have modeling stuff like this. I don't even know if they use those, I have no idea. But they'll send it back and you'll get your thing, and you want a lot of volume push, it's going to be a lot of volume push. If you want a lot of dynamics, it's not going to be a lot of volume push. So you got to play with it, you got to play with the EQ. The EQ I think is important because no matter what out of your mix, you're still going to have, it still can make it, and this is whether you want or not, it can still make the overall thing brighter. It could still take out some of that excess mud, and could like bring up the vocals a little bit. And you got to move those EQ points around because every mix is different. So my EQ, I usually start with that kind of slope, but depending on the song, I will adjust it to the way I want to hear that song. So it's not the same throughout all of them. But if you wanted something to be the same throughout all of them, after you did that, then you go down to this mastering section here, master section, and you throw in a plug-in there, an ozone or whatever, or just an EQ, and so you want all the highs of all your songs to go up. You can just do it once and put it there. Hopefully this helps in terms of both the concept of mastering and at the same time, this tool that comes with, this tool comes with Studio One, but the plugin is not Studio One. You still have to get your own plugin for mastering. And again, what I showed was Ozone 9, and I believe Ozone 10 is out. And I'm pretty sure it's probably very close. And this is what you see on the screen and how it works. So hopefully this made a lot of sense to you. And down here, there's transports and stuff like that, to play and stuff. and et cetera, et cetera. When you create a master, if you look at my create new song, create new mastering, I would highly recommend 48 kilohertz sample rate, so you have as much as you can get out of it. Okay, I think we did pretty good here. Hopefully this helps. If you like this, please, if you like all my other tutorials and you want to see more stuff coming out, which I always will put out for music and also for literary, how to write a novel and ideas like that. And my show, Radical Cathedral, which is about life and kind of reality, but not really a reality show, but check it out. But there's always new episodes coming there. So if you like the stuff here and on my channel, please subscribe and you'll get all the new stuff coming out. And if you like it, please like it. And also the main thing to me is please share it. If you know somebody who is like on the edge and should I go to mastering? Should I do it myself? Share it. And, that helps everybody promote a community of artists, producers, musicians, songwriters, mastering people like us. My only last thing would be, before you send stuff out, try it yourself. If you can afford to buy ozone, and you can use ozone, all this ozone stuff in your mixing too, because it has great compression and exciters and dynamic EQs that you can apply to any track in your mix. Then you'll also get the mastering one. So if you do get the ozone or something like that, this mastering stuff here comes with Studio One Professional, so you already have it. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to try it and try to Master Assistant and see if you can do it. And then if you did that and you did send it out, you can compare them. So anyway, hopefully this helps. Please subscribe. Please like if you liked it. And please share. And I hope you have a great mastering day, or a great day anyway. But thank you for listening. And I do appreciate it. I do hope this helps. So have a great day. Take care. Bye.